Today's Q&A is about Israeli produce, and the question is that my local VAD sent out an alert that clementines and peppers sold where we live are coming from Eretz Yisrael, and the question is, does that mean I shouldn't eat them? Like, what am I supposed to do now that I heard that? So, it's always a great thing to be able to have food from Eretz Yisrael. We get to support Israeli farmers, but we just have to make sure we satisfy the mitzvahs hatchulis ba'aretz, those special mitzvahs that belong to produce from Eretz Yisrael. And for our purposes, we could divide that into three groups, into three areas that have to be dealt with: Arla, Shemitah, and Tevel. So Arla is that produce, things that grow, fruits that grow in the first 3 years after the tree is planted are not allowed to be eaten. It doesn't apply to vegetables; it only applies to fruits that grow for many years. It happens to be that there is an Isser of Arla and Chutz Arts, but over there's a special leniency, which is that anything which grows, anytime we have even a question if something is not Arla, it's mutter. So basically, the only people who have to deal with Arla and Chutz Arts is if you have a tree in your backyard, so you know that it's what grew in the first 3 years. But from Eretz Yisrael, but after that, anything you see in the store, you just assume you're allowed to assume it came from after the tree was 3 years old. In Eretz Yisrael, Arla is usher, even if there's any kind of reasonable doubt that maybe this thing is Arla. So the different opinions about what reasonable is that 50% or 10% or 5%. So if you come across a fruit, let's say clementines, you'd have to call up your hashgacha and find out based on, people track this information to know how many percent of clementines or other fruits each individual fruit is Arla. And then whether you have to be concerned that it's Arla or not. Okay, that's for Arla. Shemitah comes every 7 years, and there's two important rules we need to know. First is that vegetables that grew during Shemitah are completely asur. It's called svichin. Those are asur no matter what, because Chazal didn't want people to plant vegetables during Shemitah, so they said all things are like that are asur. So if carrots from Shemitah would be asur completely. And the other is that fruits don't get asur as svichin. They don't get planted every year. They're not asur as svichin, but they have to be treated with kedusha shvias. So if the clementines were from Shemitah, you wouldn't be able to waste them. You couldn't ruin them. You couldn't throw out the leftovers. You couldn't export them from Eretz Yisrael. You can't buy and sell them in a regular manner. And at a certain point, you'd have to declare them hefker. That's a thing called beer. So for Arla and Shemitah are things that potentially make the food completely asur. So if the Arla would apply to the clementines, Shemitah applies to the clementines or to the carrots, or again, herbs or anything else that comes from Eretz Yisrael, peppers, whatever it is that comes from them, the Shemitah applies potentially to everything. Now, as far as Tevel, that means Trumas and Maisers. So we can't eat produce from Eretz Yisrael until we separate 5 different things: Truma, Meiser Rishon, Trumas Meiser, Meiser Sheni, or Meiser Ani. Those are 5 different things. And I'm going to give you the 6 steps you have to do in order to do that separation. The first is you're going to have to break off a piece and separate that and say this piece is going to be Truma. Then you designate 10% of this as Meiser Rishon. And for example, you could say is 10% on the north side of the stuff that I have is Meiser Rishon. That's what you've done. Number 3, you take of that Meiser Rishon that you designated, you take off 10% of the Meiser Rishon. So really 1% of the entire batch that you had, and you say this is Trumas Meiser. Okay, so the first thing we did was Truma, and this is Trumas Meiser. Those two we actually physically separated and put on the side. Those are going to have special rules to them. Then we say, now that we've done those 3 steps, we do a 4th step. We say 10% of what's left is going to be the secondary Meiser, either Meiser Sheni or Meiser Ani, depending on the year. Too complicated to calculate that for yourself which year it is. So you just say is that 10%. So let's say the 10% on the south side of what I have, it should be either Meiser Sheni or Meiser Ani, depending on the year that it's supposed to be. Then, number 5, we take the Truma and the Trumas Meiser. That was the first and the third things we did. The pieces we physically separated and put on the side, double wrap them and discard them. They have kedusha and cannot be eaten except if they're tahar and the person is tahar, which is not realistic. So we double wrap them and we discard them. And then the last thing we do is we take a coin worth at least a dime, and we say that the kedusha from the Meiser Sheni, if there was actually Meiser Sheni here, remember in the 4th step we said that what's a certain percent is Meiser Sheni. If there's any kedusha Meiser Sheni, I want that kedusha to be transferred onto this coin. Then you deface the coin and throw it into the river or the sea. Now once you've done that, basically you've separated 1% and a little bit more than that, so a little bit more than 1%. Those you're not able to eat, but the remaining 98 plus percent that's left, that you can eat.